Don't doubt Nick Saban. Now, that's my general rule of thumb. When we have our Zoom consultation sessions and people are looking to break into the business, one of the main rules I give you is just don't doubt Nick Saban. It's one of the easiest lessons that I've learned in my career in sports media. Don't get proven wrong by his success. That's been my philosophy. Anytime you cover Alabama and cover college football in general, don't get proven wrong by one of the greatest of all time succeeding. If you predict him to succeed and he fails every now and then, that's great. But don't try and be the guy who sits there in Mobile and predicts it's going to snow every day, or lives in Tallahassee and predicts it's going to snow every day. Yeah, I mean, it has happened before, so eventually it will snow in Mobile. Eventually you get a little trace once every decade in Tallahassee. But by and large, it ain't snowing there. And by and large, Nick Saban's not losing a whole lot, and Alabama's not falling off. And here's a true story. So I started doing sports talk radio in Columbus, Georgia, back after like the 2010, going into the 2011 season. And I've tracked all my picks. I'm not going to bore you with those, but I go back and I look at my Alabama log. And twice since 2000, I don't think I've told you this, Colin, twice since 2011, I've predicted Alabama to lose a football game. And I'm 2-0. I haven't predicted all their losses, but I'm 2-0 on predicting losses. One of them was actually when they were a 14-point favorite. It was when they played Manziel in Tuscaloosa in 2012. They went on to win the championship that year, but they lost. It was the week after a brutal LSU game. Manziel and A&M were surging, and so you remember that game. And then last year's Iron Bowl, that was Mac Jones stepping in for an injured Tua Tagovailoa. Bama's only favored by 3 in that game. Those are the only 2 games I've predicted them to lose in the last decade, so I don't pick against them very often. So how many of these traps have you fallen into? Let me just ask. Whether you work in this industry, whether you're just a fan, everyone has their opinion. Everyone makes predictions, either publicly or privately amongst yourselves. Tell me how many of these traps you've fallen into over the years, because I had someone suggest to me after the national championship game, this last one that they won, boy, look at how many people have predicted the demise of Alabama football over the years. And really what it is not a whole lot of people have done it. It's just when anyone does predict it, it gets shouted into 10 different megaphones, and everyone puts it on the front page of their website. We do it at 24/7 Sports too because it gets a lot of attention. Sometimes it's intellectually bankrupt because people are saying it strictly to get attention, but I do wholeheartedly believe that a lot of these opinions that have been offered, people really do believe them. They're just dead wrong about them. So tell me how many of these traps you've fallen into. The first trap was a little while ago. It was when a couple of mobile quarterbacks made Nick Saban's defense look foolish. Spoiler alert, they made the entire sport look foolish. Johnny Manziel was one of them. Nick Marshall, the following year in 2013 with Auburn, that was the eventual kick 6 game. Like Alabama lost there. And then a couple of years later, Chad Kelly and Ole Miss, they came into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. And that was the second year in a row Ole Miss had beaten Alabama. And remember, it was kind of a mixture of the hurry-up, no-huddle, mobile quarterbacks, the infusion of RPO offenses. That was what was going to spell the demise because it had neutralized what Alabama's specialty was. And that was size and depth and physicality defensively. The game's changed. Nick Saban back in 2009, he won a national championship this way. Hey, look around. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to do it that way anymore. Well, the problem here, friends, is that 2 of the years I just mentioned, keep in mind, the entire context is, oh, this is going to be the downfall of Alabama. They won the title 2 of those years. The Johnny Manziel year, they won the title. The Chad Kelly Ole Miss year, they won the title. There was no downfall. There was no demise. Now, I'll grant you that it had become really boring for some to keep predicting Alabama to win. And so everyone was trying to be the first. They wanted their voice remembered as the first that predicted the downfall of Alabama. Well, it was a trap. Hashtag it's a trap. What about trap number 2? Maybe you didn't fall into that one. Maybe you did fall into this one. This one's more recent. This is the one I was going to talk about the other night. There's a big difference in a team and a program. A team's just 1 year sample size. A program is a 3 and 4 year given sample size. Alabama versus Clemson, 2018 national championship game, Santa Clara, California. Alabama goes out there, they're favored, they get steamrolled, just smoked, 44-16. I was there. That was a boring night, let me tell you. So afterwards, there's a lot of talk. And this was overwhelming. There was a lot, I would say a majority of the headlines I saw after this game had to do with something along the lines of there being a new number 1 coach in college football and or there being a new number 1 program in college football. Now, I thought that was sort of laughable at the time. I wasn't really vocal about it. I talked about it on the show where we were just doing it locally in Columbus at the time. I talked about it at that point, but I didn't want it to sound like I was some Clemson hater or I wanted to rain on the parade because Clemson deserved all the accolades they were getting. But what I didn't think anyone deserved was to be touted as being a superior program at that point to Alabama. Anyone in the sport deserved to be touted as a superior head coach to Nick Saban, only because they at Alabama were on chapter 20 of their story. At Clemson, they were on like chapter 2 of their story. So it's the fact that Alabama was dealing with stuff at that point in their, kind of career arc of Nick Saban at Alabama that you had no chance to have dealt with yet. You hadn't even had to deal with the consequences of long-term success. Clemson had already won a title, and they already played for, at that point, 3 of them. So they won 2 out of the first 3. But yet when you look at already being a decade in, and a lot of the stuff that Nick Saban's dealt with and where they are in their program's tenure versus where you are, you haven't even had an opportunity to have some of the problems, some of the consequences of success present themselves in your program like he's had to deal with. I mean, the internal dynamics on that Bama team in 2018 sucked. They were just bad. They were still talented enough that they made it all the way to the title game. You want to get someone turned off at Alabama? Ask them about some behind-the-scenes stuff in 2018. So my point's not to make an excuse. My point is that's a team that just happened to make it to the title game. There was a lot of transition going on behind the scenes there. But my point is now we get 2, 3 years. What is it, 2 years? Yeah. So we get 2 years now to look back. And we look at where the programs are. Clemson's still a very good program. Alabama's still the best program in the sport. They never weren't the best program in the sport. Nick Saban's still the number 1 coach in the sport. He never wasn't the number 1 coach in the sport. It takes a lot more to change my personal perception on a program and a coach's stature than 1 season. I got told a long time ago, well, I guess I kind of got told in another way, and I made up the analogy because that's the way my mind works. The difference between, I've talked about this on the show before, the difference between the speed of water and the speed of honey. Now, you can change your opinion in a season of a team week to week because you only get 12 versions of them in a regular season. But your opinion of a program, your opinion of a coach, those don't need to move week to week. And so I always make it analogous to putting a drop of honey on one plate, drop of honey on one plate, and then a drop of water on another plate. And then turn those plates sideways. And it takes that honey a long time to run off. Well, the water just drips right off. Think Malcolm in Jurassic Park. Water just drips right off. Honey doesn't. That's how quick your opinion of the stature of a coach or a program should move. But because we needed some clicks out there, because we needed to generate some attention, and because we just wanted to sound like a genius and the smartest guy and girl in the room, we said, Dabo Swinney has surpassed Nick Saban. Clemson has surpassed Alabama. Well, no, it hadn't. So that was trap number 2. Now, what about trap number 3? Trap number 3 is very recent. Trap number 3, we were already at 24/7 Sports doing this show by the time trap door number 3 opened. Director Colin, do you remember where you were February 24th, 2021? We were just about to start Late Kick. We were in production meetings, and we were putting the show together. Colin and I probably did some dry runs that day, but the next week, we got hit by a tornado, and we started Late Kick. Fun diary entry. That was when Scott Cochran left Alabama to go to Georgia. And so this really put to the ultimate test how close you were to the program. You got a lot of people that cover this sport from a 50,000-foot perspective, and they are not in the weeds. They are not on message boards every day. They don't interact with the college football public every day. And if you're of that ilk, then you looked at this, and this is where you saw those headlines. Biggest blow to Nick Saban so far. You know, he's got Jeff Allen, the trainer, who's been there since the beginning, and he had Scott Cochran, who had been there since the beginning, and the strength and conditioning coach. A lot of people, this is not a knock on Cochran, it's a knock on anyone who thought this. A lot of people thought Scott Cochran was actually a key ingredient in the secret sauce that made Alabama football what it was. And that was never the case. He contributed just like any other person in the organization contributes. You wouldn't be there if you weren't. But, since then you've learned, nah, man, it's Nick Saban. He can overturn his entire staff and still win a title. But when Cochran left, and this is less than a year ago, there were headlines out there. There were very prominent, otherwise very sharp people who cover this sport who looked and said, this is the biggest blow so far that you've seen. This is the surest sign that the foundation there is cracking. If you knew the behind the scenes at Alabama, and granted, not everyone does, I get that. It's a very hard place to get information out of. But if you followed the day-to-day at Alabama, then whereas a lot of other people met that news with a yell, you met it with a yawn, because you knew changes were already coming anyway. Nick Saban had not been happy with the strength and conditioning process and results at Alabama for a couple of years now. And he was already moving in a different direction. I'm not telling you he was going to jettison Scott Cochran. Scott Cochran was still going to be there. There were going to be personnel changes made already. Now, you also probably knew, if you were close to the program, you knew that Scott Cochran had tried to get an on-field job no less than twice in subsequent years and was denied. That's a guy who wanted an on-field role. He saw the industry. He saw the strength and conditioning and sports science portions of this industry changing, and he knew he did not specialize in the areas that this sport is going towards. He knew that. He's not stupid. He knows good and well. So he wanted to get himself a new role. He wanted to get an on-field special teams role. And so, it was kind of mutual parting of ways, but Alabama looked as good as they've ever looked this year. From an injury standpoint, they were as good as they've been in a long time this year. Make no mistake about it. Not only was it not a crack in the foundation, not only was it the biggest blow that's been dealt to Alabama since Saban's been there, it was a definitive upgrade, just like we sat here on the very first episode of Late Kick and told you it would be for Alabama. And for the record, we also said it's going to be an upgrade for Georgia too. And some people laughed at that. Well, I haven't talked to those people in a while. However, I think we've been pretty vindicated on that thought. So you had trapdoor 1, trapdoor 2, trapdoor 3. Don't fall down any of those trapdoors. I'm just telling you, in the future, if you're thinking about making a bold proclamation about the downfall of Alabama football, don't. Just don't. That's not a party worth trying to be the first person at.